Hello, and welcome back to the Wii U 5. With the reveal of the next Legend of Zelda series, I decided to take a look at Minish Cap with its recent release on the Wii U Game Boy Advance Virtual Console. This was one of the titles I missed due to its handheld release. With today's qualms about third-party support on the Wii U, this was the perfect opportunity to check out how a third party handled a major Nintendo IP, despite being for a handheld. The Legend of Zelda Minish Cap was actually developed by Capcom with supervision from Nintendo. It was originally released on the Game Boy Advance in 2005, and after the CDI Zelda games, of which we do not speak of, handing Zelda to a third party always seems like risky business. Minish Cap will seem familiar to anyone who's played A Link to the Past or even other top-down Zelda adventures. Immediately, the controls are familiar and take little explaining, though unlike A Link to the Past, you can do a roll dodge. It's also important to note that due to the lack of buttons on the Game Boy Advance, you will find yourself frequently pausing the game to change items, as you will naturally want to dedicate one of the two slots to your sword. The combat itself remains largely unchanged from any other top-down Zelda game that came before it as well. The biggest change to the gameplay itself is the ability to shrink in size. This change, however, primarily focuses on altering the landscape of puzzles. It is well executed and oftentimes requires planning with the environment. It additionally offers some interesting concepts that, while not fully fleshed out visually, do make a refreshing change of perspective. The usual suspects and items make their return as well, perhaps too much so. In fact, the gameplay overall seems too familiar and perhaps a little too safe. The fact that this is my first time playing it and it felt like almost purely a nostalgia trip says it might have relied too heavily on known mechanics and concepts. Additionally, I found most of the puzzles and combat concepts to be rather easy and simple, with only a few moments of head scratching. While there is no water temple difficulty here, I rarely found myself really needing to think out a solution, as they were often readily obvious or required a matter of seconds in planning. The game isn't very long compared to a main Zelda entry. I'll say it now that it took me about 10 hours to get through, and while I wasn't going for 100% completion status, the game also offers very little in the way of compelling things to do on the side. Perhaps this is a physical limitation of the hardware, but the main quest really felt like the only primary focus they had. The Kinstone fusions are a little repetitive and a little too easy to complete. You simply find pieces and match them to people with an indicator that they wish to match Kinstones. Rinse and repeat for various rewards. The game also goes very little into why these Kinstone fusions even exist and why they physically alter the world. The figurine gallery also lacks depth. Simply offer up mysterious shells in increasing amounts to up your chances of getting new figurines. Overall, the world feels small, pun intended, when stacked up against a main Zelda entry. There just isn't that much to do but mostly plow along on the main quest. Naturally, the game is colorful and vibrant. The animations are generally smooth, and Link's vocal blurbs come through quite comically at times. In fact, the entire intro to the game reminds me very much of the intro to Chrono Trigger, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was influenced by it. However, being that this game is on the Game Boy Advance Virtual Console, it has the same issue I had with my last Game Boy Advance Virtual Console review: audio. Due to the extremely low quality of the audio hardware on the Game Boy Advance, and therefore the quality of the audio files themselves, I found that the volume needed to be turned down on my home theater system to minimize irritation to my eardrums after about 15 minutes. The Legend of Zelda Minish Cap is a good game. It does not achieve the greatness of a true Zelda game made by the magic hands at Nintendo itself, but it achieves enough parity to be considered a worthy effort. While it relies a little too heavily on playing it safe and borrowing known concepts and using all too familiar mechanics, it does do its one fresh concept justice, shrinking to small sizes. The change of perspective is interesting, and though it lacks the visual flair that could go along with it due to the hardware, it nonetheless continues the tradition of Zelda games carrying fresh new mechanics with each entry, be it a main console or handheld. I give The Legend of Zelda Minish Cap a 9 out of 10. That's it for today. I'm going to consider doing more indie game reviews in the not too distant future, so keep an eye out for some budget gaming ahead. Facebook, Twitter, subscribe, you know what to do. See you next time on the Wii U 5.